I come, therefore, back to an important observation, and that is what lies ahead for you and what lies ahead for us. In this awakening of the Arab world, our interests are truly deeply affected. They're affected, as Henry Kissinger put it to me a couple of weeks ago, when whimsically he noted, if you can compare this period in the Arab world to the end of the Cold War and the fall of the Berlin Wall, then Frank, he said, we are Moscow. Well, I hope it's not quite as bad as that. I think we have a few more cards to play. But there is an element of truth when you look at the identification of my country with the ancien regimes of the Arab world, of the humiliation that many Arabs feel for the Palestinians, for the record we have established of invaders of Muslim lands. But Americans, in stacking up those debits, forget also the huge assets we have in the region and continue to bring to the table a perception of capability, a military power, an economic power, a cultural presence, all of which are known and respected throughout the Arab lands, and in a time of confusion and change are both needed and wanted. And so before us as Americans lie real choices, but it presumes a strategy. Those choices must include listening. We have much to learn from these changes that are afoot, much to learn from the new actors, including the Muslim Brothers. We have much to find out about what solutions the region will identify for itself. We have to be careful about the ways we intrude. We've got to be very clear that there are sacrifices, not big economic ones like Marshall Plans, for which the United States has neither the money nor the appetite, but short-term to make sure the central banks don't run out of money in those nations like Egypt, like Tunisia, where tourism and other industries are not successful and won't be for a while, where foreign exchange revenues are falling off, where liquidity in the banking systems will be short, to make certain that there are swap arrangements in place, food for the larder, commodity exchanges, things that will help start an economy again and moving. Huge responsibility, short term, important. And in the long run, how do you serve as Americans can, and I believe as an investment banker, a catalyst, bringing together the considerable sums of capital both within and outside the Arab world that can be put to a longer purpose. We have a role to play as well in thinking through and being associated in a quiet way with the development of democratic alternatives. Our private sectors are looking at those choices right now, but not enough. We finally have a huge responsibility to make it absolutely clear to the new Arab partners there are red lines. And those red lines mean respect for the peace between Israel and Egypt, Israel and Jordan, the stability of sorts that has occurred with Syria, those avoidances of war and continued search for peace remain red lines for my country, without which there will be no effective engagement. I look, therefore, at the time immediately ahead. I know that this region has a long history of reaching crossroads and then pausing and continuing on without making turns, for at those moments the alternatives, the right and left-hand turns, appear to be more dangerous and more difficult, and the old road, however stony, is easier to travel. There's no doubt in my mind that we have reached such a crossroads now in this region, in this time of a second Arab awakening, and a huge change is occurring that affects our interests and it affects yours. Even if it's uncertain in its outcome, where we will all be, we have to be ready to adapt. Do we want to let this period pass without taking advantage of it? Do we really want the next generation of Arab leaders to fall into the bad old ways and habits of thinking about us and about you in Israel? Or do we want to try to affect the way they perceive us and the kind of partnerships that are potentially open? I'd like to think that we really ought to pause this time, and before we reject the crossroads, think through what we can do to make a difference. We have our interests, they are affected. And I'd like to argue that whether the region becomes democratic and repressive, liberal or populist, stable or unstable, we can make a difference. You and in Israel and we in the United States will reach our own conclusions. We will come up with our own assessments of the choices that lie before us. But I'd like to think that we can reach those assessments, come to those conclusions together. For openers, it seems to me that it makes a great deal of sense for us to join forces in thinking what's going to happen ahead, to deciding what our red lines will be and how best to communicate them, how to prepare for the changes, even fallback positions in the event that matters go wrong. And the Prime Minister's forthcoming visit to Washington provides us an opportunity for the President and Bibi Netanyahu to get their heads together and think about strategy rather than simply think about how the headlines will be managed. It's a time of challenge for leaders. It's a time for strategy, and I'll have to be among those who feel very much that we need, and both of us still do not have, a strategy. While the Palestinian issue was not at the center of the troubles that took place in Tunis, in Tahrir Square, in Pearl Green, or whatever other square that it's occurred in throughout the Arab world at the outset, the issue of Palestine has obviously come back to the fore throughout the Arab world. And it's with us, that persistent reality that has to be faced and dealt with one way or the other. It's a psychic reality throughout the Arab and Muslim world, as you in Israel know better than any American will ever understand. I believe, as I look at the challenge in front of us, that the United States must, on this occasion, be re-involved. We must, if we don't want to draw unnecessary fire to ourselves and cut ourselves off from dialogue for the future leaders who are emerging in the region. We've got to be involved, ready to take initiatives, if only to stabilize our relations with old friends like the Saudis, on whom we will depend very heavily as they play their cards and attempt to make peace or preserve stability in the Yemens, the Iraqs, and elsewhere. The issue of Palestine for the United States, to my way of thinking, is an imperative. And we alone have a particular ability to mobilize an international agenda, to build bridges, to find consensual approaches. And I believe that responsibility lies with the United States. If we don't take it, we're involved. If we take it, we're involved as well. Of course, you will make your own decisions, as we will, and we will do so in the light of very troublesome realities. We in the United States have elections coming up. You have the difficulties of your politics. The Arab world is are lands of shifting sands, to say the least, and the Palestinians are included. We are heavily, in the United States, distracted distracted by debates over our budget, over Afghanistan, over the future of our commitments even in Iraq. But this responsibility doesn't leave us, the responsibility for the future of peace between Israel and the Palestinians, and more broadly, the Arabs. We have September approaching very rapidly. And are we going to sit back and let it come and let the General Assembly pass a vote that has no particular useful outcome? Is it not possible that we can't together think through an alternative narrative to the creation of a state that will have no capital, no borders, and no stable relationship with its principal neighbor? Is there no better narrative that can be developed and put into play? And can't we, you, your leaders, my administration, think through what needs to be done? I'd like to think there are plenty of ideas. There are ideas known to each and every one of you that affects the future of the borders, affects the sharing of Jerusalem, affects the resolution of refugees, affects Israel's security itself. Endless lists of very good ideas, the parameters of 2000, the Arab Initiative, recent conversations in this country among national security professionals, lots of ideas. Ideas is not what we are looking for. We're looking for some political will. And therefore, is there a chance that we and you in the partnership that is true to all of us come up with a set of ideas that can catalyze this moment and move peace forward? Is this not a chance for American and Israeli thinking to shape concepts, even if they carry our imprimatur, that can galvanize a fresh look at the problem?